Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining today. Today we're going to talk about developing use cases from a couple different perspectives and give you a few tips for you to take away to develop your own and to kind of get ahead of the game. So hopefully I'll demystify a few things for you, boil some things down to be overly simple, and give you a few launching points where you can dive off and find more information and dig into it on your own. So today we're going to walk through a few slides. Should be a fairly short presentation, and this is part one of a two-part series that I'll be delivering on this topic. So first we're calling it developing use cases for your product and for your audience. So we're not going to just talk about software use cases. We're going to also talk about sales and marketing in the same context of use case development, which is an area that goes quite often unrepresented. If you go on the Wikipedia page, you'll see talk of multiple different kinds of use cases. But if you go on something like LinkedIn Learning, you'll find almost all the use cases are around UML and designing diagrams to identify the product engineering focus and design issues. We're going to touch on both of those a little bit and then narrow in on the business side of use case development, which is most relevant for me at this point. So it's not just for the product, but it's also for your audience and your customer. So we're going to touch on the first 3 points today, defining generally what a use case is, what the process is for collecting info to use in your use case development, how to gather kind of global market info, which is just more of a tip, and then in the second part we'll dive into building the plan, executing on it, and then kind of rinsing and repeating that plan and using it over and over. So what is a use case? Well, this is the long definition. You go on Wikipedia, you get an even longer one. But really, it's down to the how and the who. And how, I'll just read it out loud here then. Use cases help document who users are and how these users will interact with a software or business system to achieve the goals they have for leveraging the system. Now, a few key words that we should recognize in there are these action words as well as the actual audience, who and how. And there is a level of interaction. If there's no interaction, then actually there's no use case here in a way. We're talking both about both software systems and business systems here, and I don't want you to forget the idea of goals. So the software system, it's really easy to think about, oh, here's what I'm using the system to do for me. But a business system, as part of a corporate sales conversation, is also really important. What are the goals and what are you trying to achieve? We'll come back to all of this, but I want to simplify this into even a smaller definition. Use cases tell the story of how users will interact with a system to achieve their goals. So really there's a personal connection between the users and what they're trying to achieve by using your product or your system or your solution or your platform. If there's no connection between that user and them achieving their goals, then you do not have a well-defined use case yet, and you need to go back to the drawing board and you need to figure that out. It's got to be a personal thing that is helping them get ahead in their job. If you go to Wikipedia, you'll see this diagram, and I'm not going to walk through the nuances of what all the different kinds of line styles and everything mean here, but there's 3 key elements that are often described when we're talking about use cases. Again, these are highly technically focused ones from the software engineering side or the computer science side. There's the idea of actors, the people that are involved, or the users. There's the idea of goals or things that they are doing. In this case, you can see the actors are the little man drawings. The goals are really the things like cooking food or serving wine. And then there's triggers, things that make those things happen. So a waiter will receive an order, and that the goal was to order food. So there's those 3 key elements, and you can dive into more of those. There might be 4, 5, 6 by the time you're done reading about it, but really it boils down to these 3. Now, for the less technical person watching this today, is really geared towards you actually. These 3 alternate definitions or other alternate key elements are more important. So instead of thinking about just actors, think about stakeholders. So it's who's involved with all these processes, who cares, who's impacted, who initiates these things. And then instead of just goals, also think about what the results are. So this person's involved, and the goal and the result, the end output of their involvement is X. And then think about it as just actions, not triggers in terms of a computer science lingo, but as actions that people take. So as they interact with your system, all stakeholders are hoping for some result through some kind of action. So I mentioned before that there's two types of use cases that I'm going to talk about, and we're going to narrow those down right now. But in general, we've talked about what, considering what a use case is. We ask the question, what's the purpose of the solution? And in the context of the end user. If you don't have the context of the end user, then why are we even having the conversation? If you don't care about that, if you don't care about what the purpose of the solution is, then you don't have much need for a use case. Now, the first type of use case that I mentioned was the software use case. And when you look at this from a technical level, so you're actually trying to understand who the key users are, how they'll use the system from a technical perspective. That's an easy kind of conversation to have. In many cases, it's fairly straightforward. This is a product for a developer. The developer will use the system this way. They'll install it this way. They'll interact and report and deliver products this way. On the other side, the business side is a little more ephemeral. But we're looking at what the key business processes are that are impacted by the system. So instead of just looking at the individuals involved, we're actually looking more at the processes in the business. Is it a financial process? Is it an operations, logistics process, etc.? These are all core systems and processes within a business. The end result of, say, the software side is that you end up being able to capture, as you're developing your use case, you're able to capture the technical needs of the end user. And then you can communicate them back to the engineering and design teams that you're working with. So product managers, this is kind of the output of developing a use case around your software. You're matching the needs and expectations with the actual development processes that you're implementing in the company as you build your product. Now, business side, the output of developing use cases more for the sales and marketing side. You're giving them key information about the problems that are being solved at that prospect or that customer's site or within their business systems themselves. And you're giving them some tools and messaging to help them communicate it as a solution to that prospect. So two different use cases. We're going to focus primarily on the business use cases going forward for the rest of this presentation and as well in part 2. But if you want to go dive into software development use cases, you'll find more links on that Wikipedia page, and there are a lot of other areas you can dive into there, including just the myriad of different ways to diagram all of these use cases and the actors and the goals involved, etc. And you can go have fun there. But we're going to focus on the business side. And that's why I say we're diving into the process, and it's specifically for product leaders and marketers, and really marketing leaders as well. So 2 parts to identifying the customer, or really pulling out the details about the customer. It's critical that you understand the customer in these cases, because the use case that you're trying to solve for is the customer's use case. So first, you'll hear the term personas if you do any research on identifying the customer needs and use cases. And personas really are a whole another area that you can dive into and get specialized in as well. There are a lot of resources out there for that. I'm not going to do it justice here in one slide, but you'll get the general idea. As you understand the different kinds of people that are involved in the business, you will be able to identify them by kind of grouping them into groups called personas. So really, personas help you. You can ask the question yourself: who are the use of the solution, or generally, who are the related key stakeholders in the company who will be using it? For example, are they developers? Are they business analysts, leaders, executives, etc.? Just identify all the different kinds of people that are involved in the customer's site that will be impacted somehow with your solution. And then map it to their kinds of general roles. This will be important later on, but you want to know whether they're a user, they're going to be recommending and they're reviewing all these different solutions, and they're going to be recommending a winner, or they're a decision maker or a buyer, or they hold the purse strings, or they're going to be a user. You have to understand the role of that person. So personas and their roles are really important. Individuals and their roles are really important. But you also want to understand kind of more technically in the business system side as well. So you need to understand the various internal business processes and the systems that are in place, not software systems, but the general business systems. How do the different departments relate to each other? What are the roles and responsibilities of people in those departments, and the overall goals of implementing a new system? How will it impact them? You might not be able to get all that information about a customer and how they're expecting it to impact, say, their bottom line or their head count or how it will help them in the market, etc. But you want to try to understand that as best you can. What teams will be impacted by the changes to their processes that you are going to be recommending to them by adopting your solution. And there will be changes. There always are. And similarly, you want to know what kind of impact it will have on the key personas that you identified previously within these teams. So there will be an impact. Hopefully it's a positive impact. Maybe it reduces the friction between operations and finance for reporting purposes, or the centralized data systems helps reduce the overhead for IT managers. So it drills down. A change in their internal system is drilled down to a specific persona and even a specific person within the department, so that you can understand the overall impact as you develop your use case. If you don't have that systems and that personas view, then you don't really understand the customer or what's going to be happening internally. How do you gather that data is the next question. I've got 3 specific tips here. None of them will be particularly new probably to you, but they're ones I hope you will find value in. One is doing account reviews. Now, in companies that already have a sales operations team or a Salesforce management team, etc., they will be collecting information behind the scenes all the time. But in any case, if you already have existing customers, you need to go and review each of those accounts that are in the area that you're trying to understand. How are they using your software? Go get that insight. Talk to the operations and support teams to learn more about how the customer's using the product to solve their problems. And if you're not already capturing the information you need, maybe you have a few different products and you don't know which products they're using, start capturing that information as soon as you can with every sale. The sooner you start doing it, the easier it'll be later on for people to filter through your list of accounts and find the ones that are using it the same way that another prospect would be using it. And then you can easily kind of connect them together and share that story. If you already have customers or prospects or a good friend, talk to them directly about why they adopted your solution or maybe why they didn't, and especially drill into any of the financial impacts that the adoption of your system had for them. And also talk to them a bit about how they see you continuing to meet their future demands. This will help highlight which parts are really important to them, and maybe which parts are making you less valuable compared to your competitors, less competitive. So ask those questions in real interviews, one-on-one, get them on the phone and talk through some of these ideas with them. Most customers would love to share about how things are going. It'll be harder to nail them down to some of the financial impacts that your system's had, but please try. And then competitive review is another area that's often done, where you reflect on what you want to be in the market. How do you want to be positioned in the different segments that you're focused on? And maybe what kinds of customers do you want to be capturing, for example? Well, go and look at your competitors. Do they have one of the customers you'd like to have? I'm sure they do. How did they capture them, and have they shared the stories about and the use cases about those customers? Go and get them. And in some cases, you'll have to maybe involve a third-party consultant to go and collect that information for you. Or if it's like examining and comparing systems and contrasting your work with the competitors, get someone to do it for you, or start downloading info and watching videos and going to events and learning those stories directly from your competitors. Not so you can just lift and steal, but so you can understand how they're reflected in the market based on their messaging and positioning versus where you want to be. And especially, you can get a lot of information on prospects that you'd like to win over or kind of steal from your competitors because they're sitting there telling their overall story. Now, they don't usually talk about the warts and failures in public stories, but sometimes at conferences you can get some pretty candid conference presentations from these customers, and you can maybe even do some Q&A, do some guerrilla research in those cases. And thirdly, I just want to suggest that you also take a step back, and especially as you're training your sales force on some of these use cases, it's really important that you understand the overall industries and sectors that you're going to be looking at globally. I'm assuming your product is a global focused product, that you're looking globally for your prospects, etc. In this case. This is the Fortune 500 kind of query tool. They update this every year with the rankings of companies based on their revenue, etc., and market valuations, etc. It's an interesting tool. It's not perfect by any means, but if you go in, you select a sector or an industry or a few of these other check boxes, you can rank by different parameters, and in many cases, you can really help you envision what would your top 10 customers look like, or here's the ones we have today, where do they rank versus others that rank other ways. And it's really valuable for you to sit down and say, what are the key industries and sectors that you're interested in? Don't just look at it from profitability and a ranking standpoint, but think about it from these different standpoints of which industry, which sector, which geographic region, etc. Are you specifically interested in? And then ask yourself, which customers do you really want? And then you'll start to find some of the commonalities between the different kinds of customers that you really want. And how would you prioritize them in value? And what I mean there is, here there's revenue numbers. You can prioritize them by that or by a rank number. But what's important to you? What makes the number 1 customer versus the number 100 customer? If you know what the difference is, then write that down. And here are a few of the ways of kind of figuring out what those are. There's 6 touch points here that I recommend you go through for each target customer that you're considering. What are your corporate strengths or weaknesses? Are you a small company and you can't service a really large company? Are you only targeting companies of a certain revenue because you can't deliver to larger revenue customers, for example? Or are you geographically just not represented in a certain geographic region compared to the companies you want to target? It's not saying not to pursue it, but identify it against your target industries and customers. Is your offering positioned well compared to your competitors in those geographic regions or in those industries? How are your competitors ahead of you in these different industries? And what expertise do you have available to guide you? You'll have internal expertise, you'll have external expertise. Subject matter experts that are available as consultants are all over, they're readily available. Draw them in to give you the insight you need into those industries and sectors. And then also evaluate the friction that it would take. If you want to break into a new area, there's going to be friction. It's going to take, you're going to need resources locally maybe. You'll have language challenges. Maybe you'll have different, you'll need more subject matter experts than you've had before. Or you could just focus on growing your existing business in current industries and geographic regions. There's going to be a cost there, and you need to identify what that cost and friction would be. And finally, take all of that kind of info and prioritize what I'm calling your segment focus. And this is going to be really important for the next stage. If you're focused on one particular industry all the time, that's no problem. But if you're a generic platform where you're focusing on kind of the broad view of all multiple industries, it's still really important for you to focus in and identify your top 5-10 industries. The reason I say that is it takes very little effort to necessarily to it doesn't always take a lot of effort to narrow in on one specific industry as a kind of a focus area for a period of time or for a particular campaign. But if you don't prioritize some of those industries, then you might just be trying to do the shotgun approach to all the industries, and you might never really resonate with even one of them. So prioritize them, and then you can work through that list, or you can start to group some of them together. And when you're developing your sales content or your marketing content, you can address the needs of those specific industries and maybe over a year or two you've touched on 10, 20 different industries. It's possible to do, and we'll dive into that more in the next section, which is building the plan, part 2. I will be posting this on LinkedIn and YouTube when it's available, probably the next couple days, and we'll be talking about how to create that overall story that will drive marketing content and will help you deliver your sales campaigns effectively. I hope you'll join me for that as we dive into kind of those next 4, 5, and 6 sections. And I'd love to connect with you. Drop me an email if you're interested in these kinds of resources and want to hear more or have specific questions. Connect to me on LinkedIn. That's my company LinkedIn profile there. You can find me also on LinkedIn just under Tyler Mitchell. You'll recognize me, although my hair is a little longer these days. And I've been developing resources as well for helping you streamline product launches, from more of addressing all the internal stakeholders that need to be addressed, as well as developing all the different kinds of collateral and reviewing steps. I'm working on that, and we'll be releasing that. If you want to hear about it when it's released, drop me an email and let me know. I'll get you on my list. Thanks for joining, and I hope you'll have a great day.